Good morning, my sisters and brothers. If the program started on time, if not, it's good afternoon. I'm honored that you asked me to introduce our keynote speaker, as I was the one who introduced him to our union over 21 years ago. Yes, it's been that long, and he's still in the struggle with us. I played the 3-hour speech that he did at the first marching rally we held in Goldsboro, and it moved me to do this video intro instead of writing something for someone else to read. Hopefully, y'all will have an opportunity to hear this powerful speech at some point during the convention. So just like 21 years ago, I won't go over a long list of his credentials and accolades because that would consume quite a bit of time. Google him and be inspired. What I will do, similar to what I did 21 years ago and a couple of weeks ago at his 29th church anniversary, is to use the letters in his name to introduce him, as it still holds true today. William J. Barber. The W is for warrior. He's a warrior on the battlefield for workers' rights. J, his middle initial, justice, and Jesus is what he's about. B, he's busy about the people's business. A, he's an advocate for workers' rights and author of several books and papers. R, he's resourceful. B, he's a brother to many. E, he's an iyer, educated with a vision. R, revolutionary. Some call him Rev, some call him Doctor, some call him Bishop, some call him Shepherd, some call him whatever. I call him Pastor, and I call him my brother. Please give him a UE welcome, as he is the honorary member. Organize, organize, organize. Who are we? Let them hear you, Pastor. I love you.
I'm trying to see everybody on the night. Good to be home. Is that my AFL? Y'all president right there? That means I'm trying to see different people under the mask. I can't see it. It's good to be home. Amen. And I'm 21 years. Wow, it's a lot of miles. And we all got our steps a little bit slower. I looked at Laughing House back there. I said, but we're still going. I saw his little grandson. I certainly would not stand here and not remember Saladin and pray for him. I understand he's in the hospital. And we all have to go that way at some point in life. Hospital, sickness, but we still trust God. I also want to remember all those who have gone on this year in the struggle. And want to take a moment to just pause and be silent and hear the spirit of the ancestors on this ground. First the plantation, and now grounds for freedom and justice. Let America be America again. Let it be the dream it used to be. Let it be the pioneer on the plains seeking a home where he himself is free. America never was America to me. Let America be the dreamer's dream. Let it be the great strong land of love where never king connive nor tyrant scheme. Let any man be crushed by one above, but it was never America to me. Oh, let my land be a land where liberty is crowned with no false patriotic wreath, but opportunity is real and life is free. Equality is in the air we breathe. There's never been equality for me, nor freedom in this homeland of the free. Say who you are, and who are you that mumbles in the dark? Who are you that draws your veil across the stars? I am the poor white fooled and pushed apart. I am the Negro bearing slavery's scars. I'm the red man driven from the land. I'm the immigrant clutching the hope I seek and finding only the same old stupid plan of dog eat dog, of mighty crush the weak. I am the young man full of strength and hope, tangled in the ancient endless chains of profit, power, gain, and grab the land, or grab the gold, grab the ways of satisfying the need of work, the men, of take the pay, of owning everything for one's own greed. I am the farmer, bondsman to the soil. I'm the worker, sold to the machine. I'm the Negro servant to you all. I'm the people, humble, hungry, mean, hungry yet today, despite the dream, beaten yet today, oh pioneers. I am the man who never got ahead, the poorest worker bartered through the years. Yet I'm the one who dreamed and dreamt our basic dream in the old world, while still a serf of kings, who dreamt a dream so strong, so brave, so true, that even yet its mighty daring sings, in every brick and stone, in every furrow turn, to build a homeland of the free. The free? Who said free? Not me. Surely not me. The millions on relief today, the millions shot down when we strike, the millions who have nothing for our pay, for all the dreams we have dreamed, all the songs we have sung, all the hopes we have held, and all the flags we have hung, the millions who have nothing for our pay except the dream that's almost dead today. Oh, let America be America again, the land that never has been yet and yet must be. A land where every man is free, the land that's mine, the poor man, the Indians, the Negro, me, who made America, whose sweat and blood, whose faith and pain, whose hand at the foundry, whose plow in the rain, must bring back our mighty dream again. Surely you can call me any ugly name you choose, but the steel of freedom does not stain. From those who live like leeches on the people's lives, we must take back our land again. America, oh yes, I say it plain, America has never been America to me, and yet I swear this oath that America will be out of the rack and ruin of our gangster death, the rape and rot, the graft and stealth and lies. We, the people, must redeem the lands, the mines, the plants, the rivers, the mountains, and the endless plain. All of the stretch of these great green states, we are the only ones who can make America great. America has never been America to me, and yet I swear this oath that America shall be. That was written in 1935. Dante in the middle of the Harlem Renaissance when there was a labor strike in Harlem. And Langston Hughes penned that poem. It's amazing how relevant it is still today. And some say that it was from this poem that Martin Luther King began to generate part of the idea around I Have a Dream, which actually, the best part rendition of I Have a Dream to me is in the Detroit speech prior to the March on Washington that was sponsored by Labor and the church in Detroit about 3 weeks prior to. Because actually on the day of the March on Washington, his advisors had told him not to preach that day. He said, don't you go doing like you did in Detroit. Don't you get the people riled up like that. You're in front of the whole world and you need to be very professorial. And if you look at that tape real carefully, Dr. King was very professorial. They had managed the speeches. They had a person, I didn't know this till I read Julian Bond's recent book, A Time to Teach. The government had a person on the plug, pull the plug. Yeah, but I didn't know that. I didn't know the things that they had done and how they had said what the speeches could be. They cut most of Lewis's speech because he was going to say that the 64 Civil Rights Act was not what they were promising it to be. They were over-promising and they were claiming it was one thing, but it really wasn't going to do anything, he said, for poor whites in Mississippi and poor blacks in Mississippi. And they had told Dr. King not to say something, because the original march was supposed to be a week of protest and sit in. That's what A. Philip Randolph and Bayard Rustin wanted. And so King and SNCC agreed to that, but then some of the other civil rights organizations said we didn't want that, and there was stuff about the administration, and so that's why they went from the week to the day. And if you listen to it carefully, when I learned this from reading these footnotes, I went back and read the speech, and some stuff King was saying poetically because they didn't want him to say, like they didn't want him to talk about wages. Even though it was a march for job and freedom, they didn't really want him to talk about the agenda that day that was for $2 minimum wage, which would be $15 today if it had been indexed with inflation. So what he talked about was, instead, in a very poetic way, he said, we keep getting a check marked insufficient funds. He wasn't supposed to suggest that there might be trouble if folk didn't respond. So poetically he said, don't think that this is just a summer of discontent and they'll be cooling off. A lot of things he was saying poetically without saying, because the guy was there. Y'all read the book, go check out Dylan Barnes' last book he wrote before he died. And he was standing there, if you look at it carefully, he was going to finish the speech. And he pauses and he stutters. And now we know Mahalia Jackson was standing right there. Kind of like most of the time, if she wasn't picking up somebody, they Yara, and so it would be with me. And Mahalia said she saw Doc. He had spoken, but he hadn't really spoken. He hadn't lifted up what she had heard in Detroit. And she said, Doc, tell him about the dream. And he ignored her the first time. And then Mahalia said, Doc, tell him about the dream. And he ignored her a second time. Then she said, Doc, tell him about the dream. And that old Southern moan got him. And if you look at this speech clearly, you'll see for 17 minutes he was pretty much looking at his notes and looking up, but then after that he looks up and he starts pulling. But it means so much more to me now that I know all the trickery that went in to try to keep the original vision from Ray Ruskin and A. Philip Randolph from actually coming to fruition. And so in '68, when he was coming back to the Poor People's Campaign, he was actually coming back to do what they had planned to do in '63.
All right.
But they killed him. And he kind of let us know that might happen in '65, because in '65, at the Selma to Montgomery March, at the end of the Selma to Montgomery March, he said that in that speech, which was a long, meandering speech, I think the best speech he ever did, I think Our Dream is the best closing, but the best speech is the one spoken in Alabama on the steps of the Alabama State House, where he goes into the whole Reconstruction movement and how it had changed the country, changed the South, and how it had been shut down through violence, but it was what we needed again today. And then he says, because you need to know that the greatest fear of the Southern aristocracy is for the masses of poor Negro people and poor white people to join together and form a political bloc that can fundamentally reshape the economic architecture of the country. And he said that's the whole point of segregation. It was not just hating people because of the color of their skin. Segregation and racism was fed to the country to keep people from uniting for power, labor power, economic power, to shift the economic architecture. And so I'm glad to be here with you today, because even as I heard you wrestling through the legislation of the convention, you all are still clear that this kind of coalition building of the least of these and poor and low wage and low wealth is really still the only antidote for America's sickness. And somebody still believes, as frustrated as we get with this country, as frustrated we get with the foolishness, we still can say America's never been America to me, but I solemnly hope that America shall be.
All right.
I want you to add to your list of people Christopher Shaw. I'm just leaving. Don't mind if I sit for a second. Christopher Shaw, who is out of Beaumont, Texas. And Christopher Shaw out of Beaumont, Texas, they decided that they got a new way now. They're not going to kill black men unarmed. But in Beaumont, Texas, a 250-pound cop decided, according to those who've seen the tapes that they won't release, that he would pick up a 120-pound black man that was handcuffed, that they had allegedly arrested for being drunk, and they would pick him up and pile drive his head like a wrestling match into the concrete floor and break his neck and his spine. So now he's living another kind of death. The death of his physical body, the death of his dreams, the death of his job. And for 434 days today, nobody's seen the tapes.
My God. My God.
And so that's where we are. We were there just a day ago. I bring you greetings from the Teamsters, the Black Caucus of the Teamsters, where we were. I can't see my eye. Is that my buddy back with the mask? Look at that right there. Yeah, right there with the braid. I think that's who I think it is. Hey, that's who it is. They can't tell that. Hey, bro. But I was with the Teamsters, and you know that black and white folk in the Teamsters were sitting at the same bargaining table in 1878. They didn't have a black caucus, it was together, but then the white bosses used racism to split the teams. The same thing with the people who built the levees. You know what I'm talking about down in New Orleans. In the 1870s, 72, 75, 76, 78, they were together in the South. You know, so much of this history is not told how labor organized the South was, like in Alabama. That's why they went to Birmingham, because it had a heavy labor movement. And so it was with the Teamsters on just the other day. And then on this coming Monday, add another name, LaToya. Just like Breonna Taylor, almost identical. In Gaston County, Georgia. Shot 3 times center mass because they broke in the house. It's supposed to have been a knock and wait, and there was not even a knock out. They just busted in and started shooting. And this young 32-year-old is dead. So I ask you to remember that the lawyers are fighting in that case, and we've taken it up as of this last week. And then lastly, I want to, before I say a few remarks, Erica Alexander, who used to play Maxine, you know, on Living Single, but who's a tremendous activist, will be at Greenleaf at 3 o'clock tomorrow, and all of y'all are welcome. She's going to do a review of the movie Good Trouble, the documentary, but talk about the times we're in. And you know, she's doing a big piece on reparations, a major documentary on that. And so if you aren't doing anything, go on Eventbrite and sign up and come on. It's at 3 o'clock, right, Charmaine? 3 o'clock tomorrow, get about 2:30. She's a tremendous actor. We remember from Living Single, but she's actually doing a piece with the Wu-Tang Clan now. Whole understanding of that whole movement, and it's not just singing and rap. That's a movement. Am I right?
Yes.
How many of y'all know about the Wu-Tang movement?
I'm a 90s.
All right, y'all right there. All right, I see you now. I see you. And lastly, if you all know of any, particularly young folk who we formed a C4 called Rev Up, and we're hiring about 20 organizers from now till the end of December. So if you all know some folks, where's Cassandra? Just let her know. And Cassandra, we got to do it quick in this week. So if you all know some folk that want to learn about fusion organizing and organizing, this coming Friday, we're starting a tour to every congressional district, preparing for the Greek Poor People's Campaign and others, to really talk about the power of poor and low wealth voters that we don't often hear about. And to change the language from, our votes are not really support, our votes should be demands.
Right.
You know, the politicians said, well, do you support me? No, my vote is a demand. It's not support, it's a demand. So when I was asked to come here today, I could not help but think about this one scripture. It's in the book of Amos, and it simply says, woe unto those who are at ease in Zion. And I said, you know, we could say now, woe unto those who are at ease in America. woe unto them. And the word woe there means hold up, stop, be careful. Don't act as though everything is finished. Because certainly what we see is a strategic deepening of the Southern strategy. What we're seeing is not something new. It's a deepening of a strategy that was launched in 1968 when Pat Buchanan and Kevin Phillips and Harry Dent went into Richard Nixon. And you can read this in a book called A Time of Illusion by Jonathan Scholl, S-C-H-O-O-L. But they went into Richard Nixon and handed him a memo and said, here's how we can control the country the next 60 years. Yeah, they actually, here's how but we have to always deny it publicly. And then they said, what we must do is engage in positive polarization. We must intentionally tear the country apart by design, especially the South. And we must use the animosity people have toward the Black Power movement, the LGBTQ movement, the women's movement, the freedom movement, and the civil rights movement. And we must use that to split the country. They said in the memo, it will probably get out of hand, but but by the end we'll have what we want.
Right.
So all that we see, you know, the people going around talking about this is the lie. Trump, no, Trump ain't that smart to tell this lie. Right. He may have charismatized it and funded it, but this thing traces back to how the Reconstruction was destroyed in the 1870s, 1880s, but even more recently in 1868. And they actually said what we're going to do is we're going to make the Democratic Party the party of black folk in the South. We're going to make the Republican Party the party of white people, but we're also going to be able to run this same game in some of the ethnic conclaves of the North. But the thing we must do is divide the country. This will not work without the spirit of insurrection. It won't work. We have to divide it and then believe that we will get the larger part of the division. And we've got to fund division. We've got to talk division. And if anybody ever catches on, we have to deny it publicly.
Right.
Atwater, y'all remember Atwater down in brain cancer, who worked for Bush.
Right.
He said, we must learn how to talk about race without talking about race. Ibram Kendi said, you got to understand that race is not the father of racism. Racism is the father of race. In other words, folks didn't hate you because you're black. They wanted economic power, so they came up with a way of hating you because you're black in order to fuel the system of racism. But he said that they said we have to make sure that we divide and we split the country intentionally all over the place. And he said if we do this, we can control the country for the next 60 years, because before one vote is cast, we can control 31% of the Senate. 28 members of the Senate, 31% of the House, and we can control 170 electoral college votes before any vote is cast, because what we're going to do is create the division from Maryland to Arizona. We're going to use the South and the Southwest. And he said the language we're going to use, it won't sound racist, but it will be. Because instead of calling somebody the N-word or outright, we're going to use language like forced busing, entitlement, tax cuts. And to some people it would sound benign. It won't even sound like it's racist, but the policies implemented will have a negative impact on black people and a negative impact on poor white people, but the goal of it will be to cause white people to blame black people, particularly out in the South, for their problem, and we split the country.
All right.
I thought we ought to know that. And when you and when it came to the voting piece, As you know, the Voting Rights Act was gutted. People keep talking about Trump. No, the Voting Rights Act was gutted when Obama was in office. It was gutted June 25th, 2013. Right? And how did they do it? Interestingly, watch these political moves. They did not end the Voting Rights Act. They said the formula needed to be adjusted. And only the Congress could do it. So they sent it to the Congress because they knew what? The Congress wasn't going to get anything done. So the Voting Rights Act has been sitting in the Congress for 9 years. Wow. 9 years. They could fix it in 15 minutes. John Lewis wrote the fix. Manchin told John Lewis he supported the bill while John Lewis was dead. Alive. As soon as he died, and the Senate flipped, the U.S. Chamber of Commerce called Manchin and sent him and said, we're calling in markers. And there are two things you must ensure don't pass: living wages and restoration of the Voting Rights Act.
All right.
Now why is the U.S. Chamber of Commerce all up in that? Because you can never separate a battle for voting rights and a battle for economic justice. The poverty and low wages are created by policies, not by individual personal decisions. So they sit the Voting Rights Act in the Congress. It's just sitting there. Notice there was no major, we were here, many of y'all right here in North Carolina. We built Mall Monday, we fought back, we fought in the state, we beat the worst voter suppression case that came after Shell. The worst case that happened in the country happened right here. We filed suit 42 minutes after they signed it. 42 minutes after they signed it. And it took us 7 years and 12 pro bono free lawyers. I don't even know where we found them. And the state spent $6 million of your money and my money. $6 million. And we beat them. And even beat them in the Supreme Court. And now we're beating them in the state court, which is really messing folk up, because normally you look for the state courts to uphold. But one of the strategies that all of us implemented, we said, if we may not be able to win the federal offices, but if we work together, we can maybe win the governors and the attorney general and some of the courts. And now what's happening is the state courts in North Carolina are unlike any state courts in the rest of the South. So a few weeks ago, what did they do? They returned the largest return of voting rights in the history. At one time, 56,000 formerly incarcerated people got their voting rights back. That's your And that work began when all of us were going to jail, and people thought we were just doing more money. No, we had a movement strategy and a legal strategy.
All right.
You remember Latin House when we started talking about, we were talking about how can an unconstitutionally constituted legislature change the Constitution? 2013, 2004, we were up there chanting that. This past week, the judges agreed with us.
All right.
The Supreme Court said that wasn't first written by the lawyers, it was first spoken by the movement.
All right.
And when we first started speaking it, some lawyers said, we can't litigate that. We kept saying it. We kept saying, how's an unconstitutionally constituted legislature going to change the Constitution? You got to go. And then Forward Justice and Kate, Al McShirley's daughter, they picked it up and figured out a way to litigate it. And the Supreme Court of North Carolina just ruled that a state legislature that has questionable racist or class-based gerrymandering of their offices cannot change statutes in the Constitution, which now means all of the stuff they have passed relative to voting laws since 2013 can now be challenged because an unconstitutional constitution. But that began with them little meetings we had.
That's right.
And all those arrests. And talking about how to turn the arrests into court fights.
That's right.
Right.
which is ultimately how we're going to probably win living wages. Because in North Carolina, the Constitution that was written in 1868, in its preamble says, we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all persons are created equal and endowed by the Creator with certain inalienable rights, among which are life, liberty, and the enjoyment of the fruit of their own labor. In 1868, our foreparents, black and white fusionists who came together, inserted a labor clause into the preamble of North Carolina's Constitution. It's the only Constitution in the South that has it. And when we get some lawyers that figure out how to litigate that, we can argue that if you don't pay me a living wage in North Carolina, then you are violating my ability to enjoy the fruit of my own labor.
All right.
Movement. Organized. You gotta have a protest strategy. You have to have in other words, an agitation strategy, a litigation strategy, and a voter participation strategy. All three have to work together.
That's right. Right.
All three have to work together. And it takes time. Well, let's go back to 2013. I'm almost through 2013. They gutted it. It's sitting over there. And so it's been sitting there since. Now, there's not been one mass national movement. You think about it. They gutted the Voting Rights Act in 2013. And we have not seen civil rights organization in the street the way the LGBT community did in the street, which I've joined them, and the women's movement in the street, and they went after voting rights. Instead, I guess President Obama was president, Eric Holder was attorney general, and some people felt, well, it wasn't embarrassing them. We're not going to march, we're going to get it done in the back room. What progress have you ever seen in America that ever got accomplished just in the back room?
All right now.
What labor contract have you ever seen negotiated properly if you didn't have the folk protesting while the contract negotiations were going on?
All right, come on.
So pretty much we been in the back room for 9 years. Then Trump comes along. Then they decide, but they don't overturn the Voting Rights Act. They said, no, we're going to go another way. We're going to overturn Roe.
Okay. Okay.
And for years, they wouldn't do it because the majority of the Supreme Court justices that are put on the court by the extremists, the majority of their votes are pro-corporation. That's why they're put there. The other stuff is diversionary. But the number one reason they're put on that court is to treat corporations like people and people like things. So then they say, okay, we're going to go after Roe. And we're going to, watch this, we're going to cut Roe and send it to the states and force a states' rights battle.
All right.
And hope that the battle over Roe and the battle for the LGBT issue will split black and white people. They play that card. They try to use the LGBT issue and the abortion issue to split black and white folk from one another. Because they think that, black folk are homophobic and so forth and so on. But they send it to the state. And Clarence Thomas uses language from the Dred Scott decision. Have y'all read that paper?
No.
Yeah. He used language from the Dred Scott decision to overturn Roe, and also he took his own dissent. In other words, he wrote opinions for years where he was the dissenting factor, and then he footnoted his own dissent in this ruling, which is something you're not supposed to do technically. You're not supposed to, when you're proving a law, I'm not a lawyer, but I got one that went to school for law. You're not supposed to quote yourself. That's not supposed to be the way you decide what's it called, precedent. You're supposed to quote other folk. But in his opinion on Roe, quoted himself. And then said, watch this, this can be used in other ways. It can be used against the LGBTQ community. It can be used against the right to marry who you want to, because these ought to be votes of the state. Where's the Voting Rights Act sitting? In the Congress. We don't have a national voting rights bill, and we don't have a national bill to protect women's reproductive rights. Without saying it, he's saying We can take all of this to the states. Now, who controls the majority of the states? The extremists, who call themselves Republicans. And many moderate Democrats who, Dr. King said the moderate Democrat was the worst enemy to the civil rights movement. He did. He said that in Birmingham jail. My point is, it's not just one thing. So now here we are with no Voting Rights Act. We have less voting rights today than we had August 6, 1965 when the Voting Rights Act was first ratified. Because Section 5 has been gutted and stalled in the Congress. We have women's reproductive rights taken. They're saying that that's going to have to be voted on state by state, and the suggestion is we're going to put the voting rights piece in the same way. And the only way this could be stopped is for the Congress, the Senate, and the House to pass national voting laws and national reproductive abortion rights laws. And if the Congress doesn't function, or if you lose the House or the Senate, then when does that happen? And McCarthy has said, he doesn't say it now publicly, but he slipped up and said it last year, we are trying to rule for 100 years. He said, this ain't about Donald Trump. We are trying to rule for 100 years. Two more things why we can't be at ease in Zion. And so here we are. And on top of that, we've got 140 million poor people in this country. 140 million, not 39 million, 140 million poor and low wealth people. That's 43% of the adult population, 52% of the children. That's 60.9% of black people. Every 6 out of 10 black people are poor and or low wage. I was consecrated bishop, and I was telling some of the preachers I work with, I said it's an evil shame when you will ask folk for your money for your pastor's anniversary, but you're not out here fighting for folk to have living wages. For 6 out of 10 of your members, I don't care how they come to church, I don't care how they dress, but we can always dress better than we are. 6 out of 10 are either poor and or low wage. Now that's 26 million people. But watch this. 30% of white people are poor and or low wealth, but that's 66 million people. Right? So you got 40 million more white people in raw numbers, but in percentage and impact on the community, we are 30% higher. Women make up 73%, 73 million. Latino, 68%. Native American, Native Indigenous people, 68%. In North Carolina, 48% of all the people in North Carolina are poor and or low wage. 48%. 4.7 million people in this state. 56% of our children in North Carolina, 1.3 million. 49% of our women, 2.5 million. 62% of people of color, 2.3 million. 39% of white people, 2.4 million. So there are 100,000 more white people that are poor and low wealth, but in percentage, black people are 24% higher in terms of poverty and low wealth in the state of North Carolina. We got 1 million people uninsured, and one vote of the legislature could insure 500,000 of the uninsured, and 30,000 of them would be veterans. And billions of dollars. Why is it that that has been stopped? Why is it? We have in this state 49% of the workers in this state work for less than a living wage. In North Carolina, you have to work 87 hours a week and living at a minimum wage, which has not been raised in the nation for 12 years. We've not, and restaurant workers don't make but $2.15 an hour, plus tips, if they get tips. Most restaurant workers, for instance, couldn't even qualify for COVID relief because they didn't make enough base pay. And the majority of the people that were essential workers are low-wage workers, and yet we gave them a hand clap and a new name, because before COVID, they were service workers. During COVID, we changed their name to essential workers because that was a legal term.
Right.
If you're essential, you got to go.
All right.
We don't have to give you your living wage. We don't have to give you family leave. But you're essential, like an airline flight. You're essential. So we call you essential, but we treat you expendable. There are 2 million workers in North Carolina that make under $15 an hour. That's 49% of the workforce. 49% of the workforce. Now here's one other piece. And I'm going to get to the good news. Because this is good news if you hear it. Because inside of these negatives is a positive.
Yes,
All right.
Yes, it is.
Poor people die. I heard the preacher talking about death. And I'm right there when a white cop or kills a black unarmed man or woman. I'm there if a black cop whose robe kills an unarmed black man. We had that happen in Virginia Beach. I'm there in Concord where a white cop shot a poor black boy 5 times, then got on his radio and claimed he was being attacked, and they shot him again. Oh yeah, Parker, we're litigating that case right now. So I'm there. But here's one thing we may have to adjust in the move. If you're going to move and rally when there is death, what do you do if you find out that 700 people die a day from poverty? I mean, if one person being shot, or 1,000 people being shot by the police, which is hurt, wrong, and evil, and all that kind of stuff going on. But what do you do when policy is shooting people?
That's right.
That's what we're trying to say in the Poor People's Campaign. We're saying, wait a minute, 250,000 people die every year from policy that create poverty. We call it policy murder. 250,000 people a year, 700 people a day. Divide that by 24, you find out what it is per hour. From poverty. And it's clear now that poverty is policy driven. Because last year, when they provided the child income tax credit, they said it ended 50% of child poverty. The problem is it was temporary.
That's right.
So we pick people up for 3 months and then. But what it proved is poverty does not have to exist.
That's right.
There's no scarcity of resources.
That's right.
The scarcity is in consciousness.
Yeah.
That's right.
87 million people in this country without health care or uninsured. We're the only country of the 25 wealthiest countries in the world that does not provide universal health care. 4 million people get up every morning, can buy unleaded gas and can't buy unleaded water.
Come on. Okay.
Now, why you tell us this, Brother? Because inside of it, see, I'm a theologian and I'm through.
Come on, Pastor.
The Bible teaches us
Come on.
that there comes a point where the stones that the builders reject
Come on now. Come on.
Say so.
Come on.
Say so.
become or have the possibility of becoming
Yes, sir.
the chief stone
Yeah.
of a whole new social construction.
Yeah.
And so you heard me say what those numbers were, but let me tell you some other numbers that we are not hearing about. You know, all the pundits are saying the midterms are over. This is what's going to happen. This state is pink. This state is red. But guess who they never talk about? Poor folk and low-wage folk. So we decided to do a study with some political scientists from Howard and Harvard and Yale, and Columbia. And guess what we found out inside the numbers? The numbers showed us that low-income voters in this country now make up 33% of the electorate. That's a block of power, baby.
Yeah.
One time it was like 20%, but now low-wage folk, union folk, low-wage folk make up 33% of the electorate. And in battleground states, Alabama, Florida, Arizona, Georgia, Michigan, Nevada, North Carolina, Pennsylvania, Texas, Wisconsin, poor and low-wealth wage people make up 45%. 45% of the electorate. So we went a little bit further. We said of the 168 million people who voted in 2020, 59 million or 35% were low income.
Okay.
We talk about how Biden and Kamala got in, but one piece of data you didn't hear is they got in because 53% of poor and low-wealth people, black and white, voted for. And we also found out that most poor whites do not vote against their own interests. Oh, watch it, Barber. That can't be true. See, there's a difference between innuendo and fact. What we found out is most poor and low-wealth white people don't vote. Okay. Either way. Just like many blacks don't vote, because nobody talks to them. When the last time you had a presidential candidate have a debate on if you get elected, how you gonna address poverty and low wages? When do you remember that? When the last time as a governor done that? When the last time as a candidate for Senate talked about that? If I get elected this one, what do you hear? Middle class, wealthy. 33% of the folk in the country voted are not even talked to. 45% are not talked to in battleground states. That's not only morally inconsistent, that's economically insane and politically inept. And here's my final word, because I know y'all got stuff to do. In North Carolina, the total number of poor and low income voters that are eligible to vote are 4 million. The total that voted in 2020 are 2.6 million. 55% voted, but 40% didn't, which means 1.4 million did not vote. Nobody won an office in this state by a margin larger than 140,000 votes. And you got 1.4 million that didn't vote, which means if you start calculating that, all we need in North Carolina is 19% of poor and low wealth voters. Not 30, not 20, 19% of poor and low wealth voters mobilized around an agenda, not a candidate, around an agenda that says my vote is a demand, not a support. In Florida, it's 4%. In Georgia, it's 7%. In Michigan, it's 1%. In other words, God has fixed it so that they have done enough, they've rejected a whole lot of folks, but now the rejected control nearly 50% of the voting power in this country. And the question must be now, what are we going to do with it? I've been up in the hills of Appalachia, I've been in eastern Kentucky, I've been down on the border of Texas, out in California, up in Binghamton, New York, down in the Delta, and every time we go in the community, folks start crying. Because they say, nobody comes to see about us. Okay. Organizations don't come to see about us. Politicians don't come to see about us. I was out in Harlan County, USA, one of the poorest counties, and we went back there and I said, they told me this is Trump country. In fact, they told me if you go back there, you're going to get shot. Said those Hatfields and McCoys are going to shoot you. And I said, no. We went back there and they said, nobody comes. The last president that came back here was Lyndon Baines Johnson. I said, they tell me y'all vote for Trump. They said, we don't vote. We just don't vote because we feel like none of them care about it. So we spent 2 days back there organizing and saying, well, if they don't care about you, why don't you make them hear you? Why don't you make them see you? And in the last election, 5 counties in 2018 in eastern Kentucky flipped from red counties. 3 of them went blue, but they didn't go blue, they went organized. Okay. And they decided that they were going to send the incumbent governor home, who was extremist Republican, who was against living wages, against health care, against felony reenfranchisement, and they were going to send him home. And they did. And it's possible all over this country. And it's not talking about 30% and 40%. We're talking about 19%, 10% in some places. If we just get together.
That's right. That's right.
If poor and low wealth black folk and white folk and natives and Asians get together and begin to mobilize around an agenda and vote in a block, we can determine with 19% who sits in every office of this state. Who sits in the Senate office, who sits in the governor's office. So there comes a point when God has made you the cornerstone, you got to recognize it. That's all I got to say. When God has made you the cornerstone, you can't keep acting like you're rejected and don't have any power. When God has made you the cornerstone, you got to act like you're the cornerstone. And they tell me in 1857, when the Dred Scott decision was passed, that they asked Frederick Douglass, what you going to do now? And Frederick Douglass said, look, this is a monstrous decision. It's an ugly decision. He said, the magistrates are against us. The courts are against us. The legislature is against us. He said, but that's just one side of the story. That's Goliath's side. That ain't David's side. Y'all hear what I'm saying? That's the king's side. That ain't Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego's side. And Frederick Douglass said, because they are hitting us so hard, we're not going to get weaker, we're going to get stronger. He said the more they press us, it's going to actually reverse them. Instead of shutting us down, it's going to embolden and intensify our agitation. Somebody told me, you better wear a suit today because they're having a convention. I said, the hell with a suit now. I got more. I done messed around and found out. Ain't but 19%. I'm going everywhere I can go. Will you go as well? Will you mobilize as well? Will you organize as well? Because the stones that the builder rejected have now got the possibility of being the chief cornerstone of a brand new democracy. And it's high time we act like we are the cornerstone. And tell every politician, our votes are not support.
That's right.
They are